You know that feeling when you walk through a forest, that sense that you're in the presence of something ancient, maybe even intelligent? Well, what if I told you that right under your feet, there's this bustling, hidden world, a super complex network that connects pretty much everything you see? It's an idea that might just change the way you look at a forest forever.
And of course, people have come up with a fantastic nickname for it: the Wood Wide Web. It's catchy, right? It just instantly paints this picture of a biological internet humming with information just beneath the soil. But a cool name like that also tees up a huge question.
And that's really the question on everyone's mind, isn't it? Can trees and other plants actually communicate? Are we looking at a forest of individual competitors? Or is it something more, like one giant, interconnected superorganism?
Okay, so to really get to the bottom of this talking trees idea, we've got to look past the catchy name and dig into the actual science. What is this network really made of?
So the proper scientific term is a mycorrhizal network. At its heart, it's this incredibly intricate web made by fungi. These fungi send out these superfine threads, they're called hyphae, that link up with the roots of different plants, essentially wiring them all into this massive shared system.
But here's the thing. This underground partnership isn't always some happy, perfectly cooperative friendship. It's more of a spectrum. Yeah, a lot of the time it's mutualistic, where both the plant and the fungus get something out of the deal. But it can also be neutral, or even parasitic. It's a really dynamic relationship that can change depending on the situation.
And what's really cool is that these connections can form in different ways. The most common type of network, the arbuscular one, actually penetrates inside the plant's root cells. Talk about an intimate connection. The other main type just weaves a dense net around the roots. So two totally different strategies, but they both end up creating this incredibly powerful, interconnected system.
All right, so we've established this underground network exists. Now, let's get to the really exciting part, the extraordinary, almost sci-fi claims about what this network can actually do. This is where that whole idea of a talking forest really comes from.
I mean, the functions that have been proposed are just astounding. We're talking about the network shuttling nutrients from one tree to another, sending out warning signals about insect attacks, waging actual chemical warfare on rivals, and even acting as a kind of nursery for young seedlings. Let's start with this idea of a shared pantry. Studies have shown that critical resources, things like carbon from sunlight and vital nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus from the soil, can actually travel from one tree to a completely different one using these fungal links. And this sharing isn't just random, it can be incredibly dynamic. There was this one famous study that tracked carbon moving between a Douglas fir and a paper birch. In the spring, the evergreen fir, which was photosynthesizing, sent carbon over to the birch to help it grow its new leaves. But then, in the summer, when the birch had this big, full canopy and was shading the fir, the carbon flowed the other way. It's like a seasonal stock market for forest resources.
So how is all this information moving around? Well, obviously they're not using words. The messages are actually molecules called infochemicals. You can think of them as little chemical signals that travel along this fungal superhighway and trigger some kind of response in the plant that receives them.
And this leads to what is basically a forest-wide alarm system. Picture this: a tree gets attacked by some bugs. It starts sending out chemical distress signals into the network. A nearby tree, one that's connected, picks up on those signals and starts beefing up its own defenses, producing defensive enzymes before the bugs even get there. It gets a heads up.
But it's not all cooperation and helping each other out. The network can be weaponized. Some plants, like the notorious black walnut, can actually pump toxic chemicals into the network to sabotage their competitors, slowing down their growth so the walnut can get more light and resources for itself.
Okay, so we've got this amazing picture of a communicating, cooperating, and even competing forest. It's an incredible story. But, and this is a really big but, how much of this popular narrative is actually backed up by solid, repeatable science? Well, this is where we get into a real web of controversy. Because for as amazing and as cool as these ideas are, scientists are now pumping the brakes a little bit and asking a really critical question. How strong is the evidence for all this, really? Are we maybe romanticizing what's happening underground, or is it all scientifically proven?
And the honest answer is, a lot of the most headline-grabbing claims, the intentional sharing, the widespread warning signals, have come under fire for being based on studies that are really, really hard to prove out in a real forest. Now, this doesn't mean they're wrong, but it absolutely means the science is far from settled.
And this really gets to the heart of the challenge. See, in a lab, you can control everything. You can prove a chemical move from plant A to plant B through a fungus. But a lab in a box isn't a complex forest. Then you go out into the field. And sure, it's realistic, but there are a million other things going on. How do you prove that what you're seeing is because of the network, and not just stuff moving through the soil or a dozen other factors? It is incredibly difficult to nail down cause and effect.
Okay, so with all that debate swirling around, what can we say for sure? It sounds messy, I know, but despite all the controversy, there are some foundational truths that pretty much all scientists in this field agree on.
So here's the scientific consensus. Number 1, this partnership between plants and fungi is absolutely fundamental to life on land as we know it, period. Number 2, it's a two-way street. Plants feed the fungi carbon, and in return, the fungi act like expert miners, digging up crucial nutrients for the plant. And finally, yes, some transfer of resources between plants through these networks definitely absolutely happens. And just to give you an idea of the scale of this partnership, a single plant might send up to 30% of all the energy it produces from photosynthesis down to its fungal partners. Think about that. That is a massive investment, which just goes to show how critically important this relationship is.
And probably one of the most important and best supported roles for these networks is helping out the next generation. By plugging into the huge, established network of a mature parent tree, a tiny little seedling gets access to a vital supply line of nutrients and water. This dramatically, and I mean dramatically, increases its chances of survival.
So this really brings us to the absolute core of the whole debate. The argument isn't about if these connections exist or if things move through them. That's pretty much settled. The real fight is about the why. Is it intentional, strategic collaboration, like a conscious choice? Or is it all just the passive result of natural processes, like chemicals leaking and flowing downhill along the path of least resistance? So the next time you take a walk in the woods, just look down and think about what's happening beneath your feet. Are you standing on top of a collaborative community, a ruthless competitive battlefield, or, more likely, a beautiful and complex mix of both? The science is still unfolding, but one thing's for sure, the forest floor is way more complex and mysterious than we ever gave it credit for.